Hello! We are thrilled to announce a recently published paper in a journal that is open access. So that means this paper is available for free to everybody. So I'll go ahead and provide a brief summary. This paper really makes a very simple point. So as you know, language assessment typically focuses on language outcomes. In other words, a child's language proficiency, their signing skill or fluency, their language level, language delay, terms like that, all that sort of outcomes-focused data. But we are arguing that if we want to understand or interpret a child's language outcomes, their language level, appropriately, then what we need to do is look at the language input that has happened previously, particularly language input during the period from birth to age 3, which is a really critical time for language acquisition. Now, that's something that you already know, but what this paper argues is that this is really important in two ways. One, at the level of a single individual, and two, at the level of a group or population. So at the individual level, we have to look more in depth at the child's input, and that's going to help us understand or interpret what their language outcomes mean. For example, suppose that the child has a language score on some test of a 70. That same score could mean one of four things. That could be unsurprising and unimportant. It might be unsurprising, but still really important. It might be surprising and important in a negative way, that is. Or it could be surprising and important in a positive way. So all four of those interpretations can describe the exact same score. And so how do we know which interpretation is appropriate? We need to look at the child's language input. So that's at the individual level. Now at the group level, input is also important, but we need to be very careful. It's challenging to do this at the group level. Research traditionally has analyzed input with the concept communication mode. So for example, a researcher may decide that they want to compare oral children or listening and spoken language groups to a group of quote-unquote signing children, maybe total communication, let's say. And so they might divide the children into two groups. And that's based just on the researcher's own decision ahead of time. They get to make up the rule that they want to use to classify those children. And that's just at the researcher's own discretion, of how they want to make that distinction between oral and signing kids. But the problem is whatever rule that researcher makes may not really represent the children's actual experiences. So within an LSL group, they can have different hearing levels, they can have different experiences with hearing technology, etc. And within a quote-unquote signing group, there can be a lot of diversity. They will have different kinds of signing systems, they will have started at different ages. Some families may use a lot of signing, some families may sign very little. Some of them may use ASL, some may use sign to English, some sign-supported speech, all of that kind of variability. And it means that that label, or that way of classifying children, isn't going to help us understand their language outcomes. And so instead, what should we do? What I'm proposing is that we get rid of this approach where the researcher gets to decide what the rule is. I think we need to toss that out and instead replace it with an approach that describes or categorizes each individual child's experience and then uses math, a sort of algorithm-based approach like clustering or other kinds of classifying mathematics to identify groups or clusters of children where within a group all of the children have a similar experience, but the researcher won't necessarily know what those groups are, but we can use math to let the data show this. So this is not a top-down approach, but rather a bottom-up strategy. And so I'm proposing or arguing that that bottom-up strategy is going to improve our ability to understand the language outcomes. And this would apply to, for example, a research study that has groups of participants, or, for example, at the state level, if we want to look at an EDI system and we want to understand why the children in a particular state are doing great, or maybe why children in another state are still struggling, we want to be able to relate their language input to their language outcomes through this bottom-up strategy. So the paper expands all of this, of course, and it's available now, so please go ahead and share it far and wide, and please also feel free to contact me. I'm happy to discuss this more with you. Thanks.